Hello! It's been a long time since I've done this. Can't remember what I do now. Well, first thing I'm going to do is going to put time in one of these corners here, just so you can go straight to the build, because there is going to be a bit of waffle, I'm afraid. First thing I want to do is thank everybody for being patient with this channel, especially those people who contribute their hard-earned money, who donate or tip, however you want to call it. I want to thank you, and hopefully the next video build won't be as long as this. There should be no reason why, but you never know with life, do you? So the Privateer. I've always had a soft spot for this kit, way back in the early 80s when I think it was released by Matchbox. And I always remember being baffled that this was a Liberator, but it wasn't a Liberator. Strange evolution. Also, I remember a fantastic half-tone ad on the back of model magazines, full A4 scat, with a bloke, I think it was a photographer who had built the model. There was little inserts of the details of the model. I always remember the wheels in the undercarriage. Really good. For its day, really good. And I think there was a colour one as well. I'd be interested to know out there if anybody knows where I can get to see this ad again, or if it did actually exist, the colour one. I know the half-tone one did. So through all that time, it's always been one of those kits that I wouldn't mind building. One of those bucket list ones. So I was in Telford, 23. Just shows you how long ago this build's been going. And I bumped into Matt Ball. You all know who Matt Ball is. If you don't, where have you been? And we got talking about all sorts of stuff, and I mentioned the Privateer. And without hesitation, he said, I've got one of those, I'll send it to you. Okay, thank you. And duly did. Within a week, it was on my doorstep. Now, it was the Revell version, but it's the same kit, just in one colour. Instead of those three colours that Matchbox released, I think the dark blue, light blue and white. And of course, different decal sheet. But it is the same kit. So thank you, Matt. Now, I had to get this build out of the way before Easter because I've got a lot on then. This should have been finished weeks ago, but it's just dragged its feet. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, it does show here and there. With a bit more effort, it could have been a beautiful model. But I just needed to get it done. It's not bad, but it's not good. For me, building a model over that period of time, the interest and enthusiasm wanes. And it was going to do that. And you know when you start going backwards on a model, that was starting to happen here. So it needed to get done for all sorts of other reasons. So I hope you like the end results. I hope Matt likes what I've done with his kit. And I'm going to be at the Yeovil Model Show. I think it's the 7th of April. So if you're there, do tap me on the shoulder and say hello. It'd be nice to talk. So I think I've covered everything. I can guarantee I'll remember something as soon as I switch this off. So let's get on and see what I did with this Privateer. So this originally was released by Matchbox in the 80s. Came in three colours, the plastic, dark blue, light blue and white. So this is the Revell offering, which in itself is an old kit, around 2009. So let's see what we get. Yuck. So the first thing I'm going to do is thin down the leading edge, all the edges of the tail, rudder and wings. This is a very messy job, hence the damp rag, to keep the shavings in place. So as you can see, there's very little detail on the surface. I was humming and ahhing whether to rivet or rescribe the surface. So for now, I'm just going to rescribe the surface using the existing panel lines as a guide. So with the help of some dyno tape that's been cut into 2 lengths, I'm first placing the tape on the edge next to the raised panel line carefully, and I'm going to be using this scribing tool. Well, I'm going to give it a go anyway. So because I don't want to slip on the first pass, I'm doing this very lightly initially. Then a second go, and third and lastly a slightly firmer pass. So the wing's finished, I just need to deburr the surface panel lines. I'm going to do that by sanding the surface with a 1000 grit sanding sponge. So I've kept the detail to a minimum. That's my excuse anyway, as I think too much might be a bit overpowering in this scale. Then the wings will be washed in warm soapy water with a toothbrush to remove any crap left in the panel lines. Now the engine cowls are next. Now I could have lived with them, but it's the engine parts that forced me to tackle these cowls. So as you can see, very basic, and I'm baffled as to what's going on here. So I want to use the BRASSIN resin engines, which means I need to do some work on removing the excess plastic in the cowl. First thing I've done, or did, was wrap a sheet of plastic around the cowl to get rid of that step made by the cowl flaps. Now to get rid of all that plastic and maybe do something about those vents as well. No, I haven't got dandruff. Next, strips of plastic were added to create the vents. Here I can adjust the size of the openings as the lower and upper ones are different in shape and size. So a lot of effort to get to this stage, and that 3D printer can't come soon enough. Happy with this cowl, I shall treat it as a master, and with that I can make some resin duplicates. So it took quite a few attempts before I was happy with the resin parts. What doesn't help is that these parts, the walls anyway, are very thin. So next was the wheel bay detail, and once again I had my doubts about getting rid of all this. It does look very heavy, but passable, and it will take a lot of effort to replace it. Go on then, let's give it a go. Looks like some sort of archaeological Roman dig, doesn't it? So I don't want to use a Dremel type tool here, as I was worried about going through the top of the wing. Here I have more control, as tedious as it is. So with the ruins sanded flush, I'm going to pencil in the area that needs rebuilding. Then, using an assortment of evergreen plastic, I'll start adding all the detail, starting with this one first. So this looks odd until I close the lower wing. So as you can see here, I need to address the height of all that new detail added, so I can close up the two wing halves. So the fuselage is next to be rescribed, but first I need to glue that nose section on. The gap here is filled with a mix of talc and superglue. Also, the side blisters need to clean up along with their clear parts. Now I'm leaving these off the fuselage until nearly complete. So I'm going to fill this slot with plastic first. Also, these blisters need a bit of reshaping around their ends. Next, the clear parts will get this tab here cut off, so it doesn't clash with the new slot cut along this pencil mark here. New slot cut out. Now, depending on the variant of privateer, depends on the windows that need drilling or cutting out. The clear parts added, and a coat of this stuff was applied on both sides of the clear parts to stop the fogging, with the application of the talc and superglue mix to fill in the gaps. So this process is shown fully in my other videos. The Rotodyne is the one that comes to mind first. So with the sanding flush of the windows, I can now add the blisters. These require a lot of fiddling to get the most out of the fit. So here I've added a talc mix for the slight gaps and steps created by both parts. So I've sanded the surface and I'm reasonably happy, but just to check, I'm going to give it a coat of grey. Once I'm happy with that, I can finish off by rescribing. I noticed when I was dry fitting the two halves that there was a large seam to take care of. A piece of plastic card made a quick fix of this. So these are the parts that make up the cockpit. Very basic. So I've decided to make some new seats, although not a lot will be seen under that thick clear canopy part. So these are the parts that will make up one seat. All guesswork, so I hope it all works out. Here are the three assemblies made from them parts earlier. Let's see what they look like all assembled. Let's add this to the kit's floor part. A before and an after. Tail parts are added next. So the turrets are next, 4 of them. The pain never seems to end. These are of course very basic with some crude thick clear parts. So I'm just going to try and get the best out of these parts as I can, with the help of some evergreen again. And I'm going to be making most of this detail up here. I just need to make the inside look a bit busy, that's all. So after a few tedious evenings of work on these, I'm ready to add paint. But before I do that, let's take a closer look. We've got the nose turret, the rear turret, and the top turret. There are two of these. The side blister armaments. You can also see with the detail I've added here that I've built it in a way that the barrels can be added at the very end. Talking of barrels, this is a set I'll be using. Quickboost's 1/48 scale B17 resin set. Why? Well, with this set I get enough barrels to go around, to cut up, and in 1/48 it shows the detail better. And if you look at the kit parts, they're even thicker. Oh, by the way, I forgot, the blister shields are all made up. Literally made up. I drew a basic shape, printed out various sizes to see which one would suit the blister size. This artwork is then PVA glued onto some plastic card and cut out. So before I add all this crap, I'm going to brush paint the fuselage insides. So I'm going to apply another coat once this thin coat has dried. The other areas are airbrushed with Tamiya black. With the black dry, I can start with the bays. I was going to paint these either silver or white, but the instructions say to add a colour mix of yellow and green. And after some consideration, I'll go for that. It will be a nice contrast to the undersides. So the gun breeches are painted German grey, and then I've highlighted it all with a yellow. I'll just finish off with a dark wash. Next I'll add the clear parts, and because they are such a good fit, I will be having so much fun. Now before I forget, I'm going to add that blister armament now. Now because these turrets are a focal point, I need to get them as good as possible with the parts supplied. The gaps are being filled with a mix of talc and superglue. Now I can do this because I've coated all the clear parts with a coat of Johnson's Clear. This stops the fogging, usually. So all sanded flush and given a very good clean, I've given a final coat of Johnson's Clear. I've just added 2 bits of triangular white plastic to the nose gun frame, just to blend it in better. The cockpit just needs the panel decal adding. The kit's legs are cleaned up and I'm starting to add some hydraulic lines using lead wire. As far as the wheels go, they need replacing. Thankfully, I have a resin set here. With masks and an etch fret. Now unfortunately, one of the etch parts had blemishes on the surface. Very hard to get clear and cleaned up, not without taking out that fine detail. So the props, they need replacing. I'm not going to get away with these things. They are dreadful. So I've acquired these resin props meant for a Catalina. I've got 2 sets, of course. Now the Privateer didn't have spade props like the Liberator. They were a bit more pointy, like the Catalina. The resin parts are cut loose and cleaned up. Didn't take much. Just need to drill holes, making sure they're central. Then another hole is made for the main shaft of the hub. Now for the tricky fiddly part, for me anyway. I've drawn a template to help me with the props spacing. 180 degrees for each blade. Now it would have been nice to have a jig supplied with this set. The fit to the holes is nice and tight. Once I'm happy with the props angles, I'll untape it all and then twist the props to get the pitch. Right or near enough. The white plastic shaft I've just push fitted in for now. I'll glue later on. So I've glued the resin blocks into the cowls. Now because these 2 parts weren't meant for each other, there was a lot of trimming and bracing to do to get them to fit properly and to stay in position. My other worry is that the resin is so thin on the cowls that it may distort a lot quicker over time. Hopefully not before I get some final shots of the build. So I want to close up the fuselage halves and I'm going to leave all the turrets out. It just makes things a lot easier when sanding. A lot easier full stop. But before I can do that I need to add some weight. 40 grams it says in the instructions. Now I'm using this deluxe stuff. It has its pros and cons, but it's what I have to hand. Now I was originally going to contain the beads using the cut off finger from a disposable glove, but for some unknown reason I decided not to. So the weight and cockpit added, let's close these 2 halves up. Just finishing off by adding the extra bits at the front and end where the turrets go. Now I had to snip the bottom of this part so that it would fit flush with the fuselage sides. This left me with a gap of about 1mm to fill. The parts at the back fitted fine. So this glaze part will require a lot of work to look flush. Yeah. Now while looking at a lot of photographs at the canopy area, I noticed that the nose area is far more complicated than the kit represents. Never too late to spot problems. In fact, they're always being spotted too late. So once this filler has dried, I'll sand a shape to it. There you go, a slight improvement. So the canopy has had its side windows just tacked on, but as you can see from this angle, the main canopy looks deformed. The angle at the bottom looks different from the one on the top. The fun never ends. So the gaps around the canopy I'm treated one side at a time. You can see the large gap on the back that's been filled and sanded. I've created some artwork for the mask to be cut out. Next, the wings and rear tail will be added. This is a very nice fit around here. Reminds me of the Airfix 148 scale Gannet fit. This is how all wings to the fuselage should be approached by manufacturers. So with all the lumps and bumps added, a Tamiya white mix with a hint of grey is applied. This is the first of 4 colours to add, going off Revell's paint guide. The white is masked off, ready for this grey, mixed with a hint of Tamiya XF8. Then the top colour, which is made up of these 3 colours. I did a test with these mixed colours as the paint will look different when dry. With the tail finished and everything peeled off, I've got a few areas of overspray to tidy up. The next stage, using my new palette, is to add some washes to the panels to break up that nice paint finish. That's the last thing we want, a nice paint finish. I always start off with a light colour wash, remembering that these washes need to be subtle. So the colours used are just very diluted colours of the mixes used on the model. So with the paint dry, I've just given the whole surface a light wet sand. Ready for the decals? I intended to get some masks made for me, but in the end I decided to use the decals that came with the kit. The colours were suspect with these decals and were one of the reasons why I want to use masks. But I was running out of patience and time with the kit, just quicker to use the decals. So I'm going to start with the 2-part teeth decals. If anything's going to go wrong, it's going to be with these. So the decals went down beautifully. With some microsol. So next I'll add a Flores wash. With the wash wiped clean, I'll use these brushes and these oils to break up that upper surface. Once again, it's knowing how far to go in this scale. Too much will be overpowering and distracting. With the oils dry, I'll seal everything in with this matte varnish. Now I don't really like applying varnishes to a model because you can lose all that subtle patina on the surface. So let's finish this wannabe Liberator. Just need to add these bent resin barrels to the turrets. The wobbling hand of old age. Ah. Now these barrels here aren't the right ones, having those flares at the end, but they do look good. So what can I say? I spent so long on this kit, odd evenings here and there, that I really lost interest, and it does show here and there with this kit, unfortunately. But as an overall kit, I'm quite happy with it. I do love the privateer. It's unusual, and I do love the colour scheme. So I hope you like what I've done with this kit, and I hope you like the final photographs. I want to thank you for listening and watching, and your patience. And hopefully the next video won't be as long as this one. See you later.